They call you crazy because you see reality clearly. They labeled you broken. What if you're awake? Society rewards conformity, punishes clear sight. You notice the theater. Others defend the script. Question: why does truth-telling trigger rage? The sane world runs on shared delusion. Your clarity threatens their comfort. That's the game. What if sanity is the actual madness? Stakes: your peace versus their approval. Choose. There's a moment that comes to everyone who sees clearly. It arrives without warning, often in the most mundane circumstances. You're sitting in a meeting, and suddenly you realize everyone is performing. The words mean nothing. The urgency is manufactured. The entire structure exists to justify its own existence. You look around the table and see actors who've forgotten their acting, and the recognition hits you like cold water. You're the only one who knows this is theater. And that's when the trouble starts, because you can't unsee it. You can't go back to believing the script matters. The moment you open your mouth to say what you see, the room changes. Faces harden. Someone laughs nervously. Your manager leans forward and asks if you're feeling all right. The question isn't really a question. It's a warning. Stay in character or leave the stage. This is what they call crazy. Not the seeing itself, but the refusal to pretend you don't see. The world has built elaborate systems to protect its illusions, and your clarity threatens the foundation. So they offer you a diagnosis. They suggest therapy. They recommend medication. They do everything except consider that you might be perceiving something true. Alan Watts understood this dynamic better than almost anyone. He spent his life pointing at the obvious and watching people recoil. He'd say we're like fish who've never noticed water, so deeply immersed in our cultural assumptions that we mistake them for reality itself. The fish that suddenly becomes aware of water isn't sick. It's awake. But to every other fish, it looks insane. You've probably experienced this awakening in fragments. Maybe you noticed how much of your anxiety comes from manufactured deadlines and arbitrary metrics. Maybe you realized your most important relationships are built on unspoken contracts and conditional approval. Maybe you saw how the news cycles create urgency about things that won't matter in a week, while ignoring what actually shapes our lives. These aren't delusions. These are observations. But observations that disrupt the agreed-upon story get pathologized. The tyranny of normal operates through a simple mechanism. Everyone agrees to believe the same things, not because they're true, but because believing them together creates a stable social reality. Money is valuable because we agree it is. Your job title matters because we pretend it does. The weekend is sacred because we collectively decided to act like it is. None of this is natural. All of it is constructed. And the construction requires constant maintenance through shared belief. When you stop maintaining your part of the illusion, you become a problem. Not because you're doing harm, but because your defection reveals the arbitrary nature of what everyone else is protecting. If you can opt out of the game, then maybe the game isn't mandatory. And if the game isn't mandatory, then all the sacrifices people made to play it might have been unnecessary. That's an unbearable thought for someone who's given their life to the theater. So here's what happens. You mention at Thanksgiving dinner that maybe the current economic system isn't serving human flourishing. Your uncle gets red in the face. Someone changes the subject. Later, your mother pulls you aside and asks why you always have to make things difficult. Not difficult for whom? Difficult for the illusion. Difficult for the story everyone's invested in. Your clarity is expensive. It costs people their comfortable narratives. Or you're at a party and someone asks what you do. You say you're reevaluating what work means, that you're interested in living rather than producing. The person nods slowly, smiles tightly, and finds someone else to talk to. You've committed a social violation. You've refused to perform your identity through occupation and ambition. You've suggested that the organizing principle of modern life might be optional. That's heresy in a culture that worships productivity. The cosmic joke that Watts loved to point out is that the people calling you crazy are themselves living in a state of profound delusion. They believe they are separate, isolated selves struggling for survival in a hostile universe. They think the past and future are real. They imagine death as a personal event that happens to them, rather than a natural transformation of the pattern that temporarily appears as a person. They spend their entire lives seeking a future moment of satisfaction that never arrives, and they call this sanity. You, on the other hand, have noticed something. You've seen through the primary illusion. You've recognized that the separate self is a convenient fiction, useful for navigating social reality, but not ultimately real. You've felt the unity that underlies apparent separation. You've experienced moments where the boundary between observer and observed dissolves. You've glimpsed the eternal present that exists before thought divides it into past and future. And for this crime of clarity, you're labeled unstable. Think about what we call mental health in this culture. We call someone healthy when they successfully adapt to systems that are themselves insane. A person who works 60 hours a week at a meaningless job, who medicates their anxiety with consumption, who maintains surface-level relationships based on mutual performance, who never questions the fundamental assumptions of their society. This person is considered well-adjusted. But someone who questions whether this is a good way to live, that person needs intervention. The prison of useful fictions extends into every corner of our lives. We tell ourselves stories about who we are, and then we defend those stories as if they're facts. I'm an introvert. I'm not good with money. I'm too old to change careers. I'm a realistic person. Each of these statements is a cage we've built and then locked from the inside. They're useful fictions because they simplify the chaos of existence into manageable categories. But they're fictions nonetheless. Watts would invite us to hold these categories lightly, to recognize them as provisional maps rather than the territory itself. The problem isn't that we use concepts and categories. The problem is that we forget we're using them. We mistake the menu for the meal. We confuse the description of reality with reality itself. And once we're trapped in our descriptions, we can't see what's actually happening. Here's where it gets interesting. When you start to wake up from the collective trance, you don't become dysfunctional. Often you become more functional. You see clearly what matters and what doesn't. You stop wasting energy on performances that serve nothing. You invest in relationships that are actually nourishing rather than transactional. You find work that aligns with your values rather than just your resume. By every meaningful measure, you're doing better. But by the measure of social conformity, you're suspect. Picture this. A woman sits in her therapist's office. She's been coming for 6 months because her family insisted. The therapist asks her to describe her symptoms. She says she doesn't have symptoms. She has clarity. She realized her career was built on artificial scarcity and manufactured desires. She quit her job in advertising and started teaching art to children. She makes less money. She's happier. She stopped attending family events where everyone performs success and judges each other. She has 3 close friends instead of 100 shallow contacts. She meditates. She reads philosophy. She takes walks without her phone. The therapist writes notes and suggests they explore her fear of intimacy and her resistance to achievement. This is the world we live in. A world where peace is pathologized and anxiety is expected. A world where seeing through the game is treated as a symptom rather than an insight. The woman in the therapist's office isn't sick. She's awake. But awakeness looks like illness in a sleeping society. Now let's talk about the ego's desperate theater. Your ego is not your enemy. It's a function, a useful one actually. It's the story of me that allows you to navigate social reality, to remember your name, to distinguish your body from other bodies, to function in time and space. The problem isn't that you have an ego. The problem is that you think you are your ego. You've identified with the character so completely that you've forgotten there's an awareness watching the character perform. Watts described this as a cosmic game of hide and seek. The universe playing pretend. Consciousness temporarily forgetting its nature to experience the drama of separation and reunion. You are the universe looking out through these particular eyes, but you've become so absorbed in the role that you think you're just the role. The ego maintains this illusion through constant activity. It's always narrating, judging, planning, defending, comparing. It never stops because if it stopped, you might notice what's underneath the performance. What happens when you do stop? Even for a moment. Suddenly there's space. There's awareness without content. There's presence without story. And it's absolutely terrifying to the ego because the ego only exists as story. So it rushes back in with thoughts about what just happened. It turns the experience into content. It files it under spiritual experiences I've had and moves on. The game continues. But sometimes the recognition is so profound that you can't go back to full identification. You've seen that you're not your thoughts. You're the awareness in which thoughts appear. You're not your emotions. You're the space in which emotions arise and pass. You're not your story. You're the consciousness that temporarily holds this particular story as one of infinite possibilities. This recognition doesn't make the ego disappear. It just reveals the ego as a feature rather than the fundamental nature of what you are. And this is precisely what makes people uncomfortable. Because if you're not your ego, then what are you? And if what you are doesn't need defending, acquiring, or improving, then what's the point of all this striving? The entire economic system depends on people believing they're incomplete and need external things to become whole. Your awakening is bad for business. Let me take you through something. Close your eyes if you can, or soften your gaze if you're listening while doing something else. Notice your breath. Not controlling it, just noticing it. Air moving in, air moving out. Now notice what's noticing the breath. There's breath, and there's awareness of breath. What is that awareness? Can you find its edges? Does it have a color, a shape, a location? As you look for the awareness, notice that whatever you find is an object appearing in awareness. The true awareness is what's looking, not what's being looked at. Rest here for a moment. In this space before, thought labels the experience. In this openness that has no opposite. This is what you actually are underneath all the stories. This is what can never be called crazy because it exists before all concepts, including sanity and madness. Open your eyes. That awareness didn't go anywhere. It's still here. It's always here. It's what you are. The reason this matters is that suffering comes from identifying with the content rather than resting as awareness itself. When you think you are the anxious thought, you suffer anxiety. When you recognize you're the awareness in which anxious thoughts appear and pass, the suffering dissolves. The anxiety might still be there as a sensation, but there's no one who owns it, no one who's defined by it. This isn't spiritual bypassing. It's seeing clearly what's actually happening. Watts would say we suffer from a case of mistaken identity. We think we're skin-encapsulated egos, struggling through a hostile world. In reality, we're the entire universe experiencing itself through temporary focal points of consciousness. The whole cosmos looks out through your eyes, tastes through your tongue, thinks through your brain. You're not in the universe. You are the universe, locally concentrated into this particular form for this particular moment. Recognizing this doesn't make your individual life meaningless. It makes it infinitely meaningful because your life is the universe's life. Your awakening is the universe waking up to itself. But try explaining this at a cocktail party. Watch what happens. People smile and nod and back away slowly. Not because what you're saying is false, but because it threatens the primary assumption that makes their entire life make sense. The assumption of separate selfhood. If we're all the universe temporarily playing different characters, then all the competition is absurd. All the accumulation is pointless. All the status seeking is a cosmic joke. And nobody wants to hear that their life's work has been a joke. Time to talk about time itself. And death. The two things that cause more suffering than anything else. Watts pointed out that we live almost entirely in psychological time rather than chronological time. Chronological time is just the movement of the sun across the sky, the seasons changing, clocks measuring intervals. Psychological time is the story we tell about past and future, the weight we give to memory and anticipation, the way we imagine ourselves as characters moving through a narrative arc. The past doesn't exist. It happened, but it's not happening now. It exists only as memory, as present moment neural patterns that we interpret as representing something that was. The future doesn't exist. It's a projection, a mental construction, a story we tell about what might happen. Both past and future are thoughts occurring now. The only thing that actually exists is this moment. Not this moment as a point in a timeline, but this eternal present that never started and never ends, in which all apparent time occurs. When you really understand this, fear of death becomes absurd. What dies? The character in the story. The ego, the temporary pattern. But what you actually are, this awareness, this presence, has no birth and no death. It's the eternal context in which all forms appear and disappear. Forms change. Patterns dissolve. But the awareness in which all patterns appear is unchanged by any appearance. You've never not been. You'll never not be. Only the temporary character you're playing will end. And that's no more tragic than an actor leaving the stage. But we've built an entire civilization on death denial. We hide dying people in hospitals. We embalm bodies to look alive. We speak of death in euphemisms. We seek immortality through achievements, children, monuments. All of it is effort to deny the obvious fact that forms are temporary. And anyone who's made peace with impermanence, who's seen through the fear, who lives with death as a constant companion rather than a distant threat, that person is treated as morbid or depressed. There was a man who worked in palliative care. He spent his days with people who had weeks or months to live. After a few years of this work, something shifted in him. He stopped treating his own life as a rehearsal for some future moment when things would finally be right. He became intensely present. He told people he loved them. He quit hiding his affection behind irony and coolness. He spent money on experiences instead of saving for a future he might not see. He broke up with a woman he didn't truly love. He reconciled with his father. At a dinner party, someone asked him why he was acting so strange. Strange? No, he was acting sane in a world that pretends death is optional. His friends staged an intervention. They were worried. He seemed different. Too intense, too emotional, too present. They wanted him to see someone. What they couldn't understand is that he had seen someone. Thousands of dying people who all said the same thing at the end. I wish I'd lived. I wish I'd taken risks. I wish I'd been honest. I wish I hadn't wasted time on what didn't matter. He was simply taking their wisdom and applying it before it was too late. But wisdom applied early looks like crisis to people still sleepwalking. Death is the ultimate teacher if you let it be. It reveals the absurdity of postponing life. It shows the futility of living for others' approval. It clarifies what actually matters. When someone has 6 months to live, they don't spend it impressing strangers or climbing corporate ladders or maintaining pretenses. They spend it with people they love, doing things that bring joy, saying what needs to be said. Why do we treat this clarity as something that only comes at the end? What if you live that way now? You might be wondering how to hold all this, how to live with clear sight in a world that punishes it. The answer Watts gave again and again is this: you don't know. And that's not a problem to solve. That's the fundamental fact of existence. Not knowing is the most honest position you can take. Every other position is pretense. The person who claims to know is performing certainty to manage anxiety. You, in your not knowing, are simply telling the truth. Our entire education system is built on accumulating knowledge. More facts, more degrees, more expertise. And certainly, functional knowledge is useful. You need to know how to drive a car, how to read, how to build a bridge if you're a bridge builder. But existential knowledge, knowledge of who you are, what reality is, what you should do with your life, that kind of knowing is always provisional. It's always tentative. It's always open to revision. The moment you think you've figured it all out, you've stopped paying attention. The wisdom of not knowing frees you from defending positions you've outgrown. It allows you to change your mind without losing face. It keeps you curious instead of certain. It makes you interested in other perspectives instead of threatened by them. A person who doesn't know is a person who can still learn. A person who's certain has closed the door on new information. Paradoxically, not knowing makes you more effective in the world because you're responsive to what is rather than attached to what you think should be. But uncertainty is unbearable for the ego. The ego wants solid ground. It wants guarantees. It wants to know that if it does X, then Y will definitely happen. It wants control. And the universe refuses to provide that. Life is fundamentally uncertain. Anything can happen at any moment. You could die tonight. Your entire life could change tomorrow. Nothing is promised. Nothing is secure. The ego finds this horrifying. Awareness finds it liberating. Have you noticed how much energy you spend trying to create certainty where none exists? You make plans to control the future. You rehearse conversations to control how people perceive you. You build rigid structures to control the chaos of existence. And all of it fails eventually because life is wilder than your plans. The river doesn't care about your blueprint. It flows where it flows. You can build dams and channels, but ultimately you're working with the river, not against it. Fighting the uncertainty is exhausting. Accepting it is restful. This doesn't mean you don't make plans. It means you hold your plans lightly. You do what seems right given current information, knowing that new information might change everything. You commit to people and projects while understanding that all forms are temporary. You take action without needing to control outcomes. This is what Watts meant by playing the game while knowing it's a game. You don't refuse to play. You play with full engagement but without ultimate seriousness. You care deeply about your life while recognizing it's all a cosmic dance that doesn't need to mean anything beyond itself. Now let's address the practical question everyone asks. How do you maintain relationships when you've seen through the performance? How do you connect with people who are still fully invested in the theater? This is not a trivial problem. Most people bond over shared illusions. They confirm each other's stories. They agree on what's important. When you stop agreeing, the foundation shifts. First, understand that you can't wake someone up who wants to keep sleeping. You can't convince anyone to see what you see. Attempting to do so only creates conflict. The best teaching is demonstration. You live clearly, and some people will notice and ask questions. Most won't. That's fine. Your awakening isn't contingent on anyone else's. You're not here to save the world from its illusions. You're here to live true to what you see. Second, you can meet people where they are while maintaining your own clarity. You don't have to pretend to believe what they believe. You also don't have to constantly point out that their beliefs are illusions. You can listen with genuine interest to their experience, even if you wouldn't frame it the way they frame it. Compassion doesn't require agreement. It requires understanding that everyone is doing their best with the clarity they have. Third, you'll likely need to find new community. People who are also questioning, who are also seeing through the mainstream narrative, who are also interested in what's real rather than what's comfortable. These people exist. They're reading philosophy. They're meditating. They're having unconventional conversations in coffee shops and online forums and quiet gatherings. You're not alone, even though it sometimes feels that way. The awakened have always been a minority, but that doesn't make the awakening less valid. There's also the matter of intimate relationships. Can you be in partnership with someone who's still asleep? Sometimes yes. If there's genuine love and respect, different perspectives can coexist. You might see reality differently, but you can still appreciate each other's humanity. The problem comes when one person demands that the other adopt their view. If your partner insists you stop questioning and get back in line, or if you can't stop trying to wake them up, the relationship has become about power rather than love. The healthiest intimate relationships between awakened and unawakened people tend to have an agreement. We see things differently, and that's okay. I won't try to change you. You won't try to fix me. We'll focus on what we share: affection, humor, care, companionship, rather than what divides us. This requires maturity on both sides. It requires letting go of the need to be right. It requires trusting that people can love each other across different paradigms. But honestly, the easiest path is finding a partner who's also awake, someone who sees the game and plays it consciously, someone who values presence over performance, someone who's done their inner work and isn't looking for you to complete them. These relationships have a different quality. They're not based on need or transaction. They're based on two whole people choosing to share their lives, not because they're incomplete alone, but because they enjoy the dance. A couple sits on their porch. They've been together 30 years. Someone asks them the secret to their marriage. The man looks at his wife and smiles. "We gave up trying to change each other," he says. "Took about 15 years, but once we stopped, everything got easier." The woman nods. "We also stopped pretending. No more acting happy when we weren't. No more hiding what we needed. No more playing roles." The questioner looks confused. "Isn't that just giving up?" The man shakes his head. "Giving up the fight isn't giving up. It's waking up. We got interested in who we actually were instead of who we wish the other would be. Turns out, we like the real people more than the projections." This is what's possible when you stop performing, even in your most intimate relationships. You discover what's actually there, which is often more interesting than the fantasy, but it requires courage. It requires risking rejection. It requires trusting that you're lovable as you are, not as you pretend to be. Most people aren't willing to take that risk. They'd rather maintain the illusion and wonder why they feel lonely in partnership. Let's move to another fraught territory: work and money. The modern economy is built on manufactured desire and artificial scarcity. You're convinced you need things you don't need. You're told your worth is determined by your productivity. You're kept in a state of perpetual insufficiency. So you'll keep working, keep consuming, keep participating in a system that extracts your life energy and converts it into profit for people you'll never meet. When you see this clearly, you face a choice. You can opt out entirely, move to the woods, grow your own food, reject the whole apparatus. Some people do this. It's valid, but it's also extreme, and most people have dependence or health issues or temperaments that make complete withdrawal impossible or undesirable. The other option is to participate consciously, to work for money while understanding that money is a social fiction, to engage with the economy while not being owned by it, to have enough without needing endless more. This requires redefining success on your own terms. Maybe success is having enough free time to think. Maybe it's doing work that doesn't violate your values. Maybe it's building something beautiful even if it doesn't scale. Maybe it's helping people even if it doesn't pay well. Once you step outside the conventional definition, wealth, status, power, you're free to design your life around what actually matters to you. But you have to be willing to disappoint people who expected you to play the standard game. Watts himself lived this tension. He needed money to support his family. He gave lectures and wrote books and made recordings. He participated in the economy, but he did it on his own terms, talking about what he cared about rather than chasing what was marketable. He had enough. Not abundance by societal standards, but enough for a good life. And he was free in a way that wealthy people often aren't. He wasn't enslaved to his possessions. He wasn't performing status. He was simply sharing what he saw and letting that be sufficient. Can you do the same? Can you find work that pays enough without demanding your soul? Can you live below your means so you're not trapped by debt? Can you value experiences over acquisitions? Can you resist the constant pressure to upgrade, expand, accumulate? None of this is easy in a culture that equates worth with net worth. But it's possible, and the people who manage it report a quality of freedom that no amount of money can buy. There's also the question of purpose. We're told we need to find our purpose, our calling, the reason we're here. And then we're anxious because we don't know what it is. We try different things. We search for signs. We wait for clarity that never comes. What if there's no grand purpose? What if you're here to live, to experience, to participate in the unfolding of reality, and that's enough? What if the meaning you're seeking is something you create through how you engage, not something you discover by looking hard enough? Watts would say, the purpose of life is life itself. The dance doesn't need a destination. The music doesn't need to be going anywhere. You're not here to accomplish something external to yourself. You're here to be the universe's way of experiencing this particular angle of existence. Your life is already meaningful simply by virtue of being lived. Everything else, career achievements, creative works, service to others, is bonus, not requirement. This perspective doesn't make you passive. It actually makes you more engaged because you're not waiting for permission or validation to start living. You're not postponing joy until you've found your purpose. You're recognizing that each moment is the purpose, each breath is the meaning, each experience is the point. From here, you can do anything without needing it to be more than it is. You can work without needing your job to define you. You can create without needing your art to make you special. You can love without needing relationship to complete you. Now here's something that often gets overlooked. Your body knows things your mind denies. Western culture has spent centuries privileging reason over instinct, mind over body, thought over feeling. We've been taught to override our physical intelligence in favor of mental analysis. But the body doesn't lie. It responds to truth and falsehood before you can rationalize your way into compliance. Have you noticed the physical sensations that arise when you're about to make a decision that violates your integrity? The tightness in your chest, the churning in your stomach, the tension in your shoulders. Your body is giving you information. It's telling you something isn't right. But you've learned to ignore these signals in favor of what makes sense logically or what you think you should do. You override the wisdom of your nervous system and then wonder why you feel anxious. The body is always in present tense. It can't live in the past or future. It's here now, responding to actual stimuli, reading situations with an intelligence that predates language. When you walk into a room and instantly feel uncomfortable, that's not neurosis. That's information. Your body is picking up on subtle cues, micro-expressions, tonal qualities, group dynamics that your conscious mind hasn't processed yet. Trusting that feeling isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Similarly, your body knows when you're lying to yourself. You can tell yourself a convincing story about why you should stay in a relationship that's deadening your spirit, but your body will keep score. It'll manifest tension, illness, fatigue. It'll try to get your attention through symptoms because you're refusing to listen to the message. The body is brutally honest. It lives in what is, not what you wish were true. This is why embodied practices, meditation, yoga, martial arts, dance, are so valuable for people waking up. They bring you back to physical sensation, to the present moment, to the truth of what's actually happening in your direct experience. You can't think your way into presence. You have to feel your way there. The mind spins stories. The body tells truth. When they're aligned, you know you're on track. When they're in conflict, the body is usually right. Try this. Think about a decision you're facing, something you're uncertain about. Now notice what happens in your body when you imagine choosing option A versus option B. Not what you think should happen. What actually happens. Does one option create openness and ease? Does the other create contraction and tension? Your body is voting. Are you listening? People who've become disconnected from their bodies often make terrible decisions because they've lost access to this guidance system. They choose partners their body never relaxes around. They take jobs that make them physically ill. They stay in situations that are slowly killing them, all because they're living in their heads, following mental logic that makes sense on paper but violates what their organism knows. Reconnecting with somatic intelligence is part of waking up. Let's talk about a trap that catches even people who've seen through the mainstream illusions: spiritual materialism. This is when you turn awakening into another achievement. When you collect spiritual experiences like you used to collect degrees or titles. When you use your insight to feel superior to people who haven't had similar insights. When enlightenment becomes a destination you're striving toward rather than recognizing what you already are. Watts warned about this constantly. He saw people who'd had genuine experiences of non-duality turn those experiences into identity. I'm awakened. I'm enlightened. I'm further along the path than you. This is ego capturing insight for its own purposes. True awakening includes recognizing that there's no one to be awakened. There's no achievement. There's no status. There's just this, exactly as it is, with no one separate from it claiming to understand it. The moment you think you've got it, you've lost it. Not because it went anywhere, but because thinking you've got it re-implements the illusion of a separate self who can possess states of consciousness. You're back in the game, just playing a different role. Instead of worldly achiever, you're spiritual achiever. But achievement of any kind reinforces the primary mistake, that you're a separate entity who needs to get somewhere, become something, attain some state you don't currently have. What if there's nowhere to get? What if you're already what you're seeking? What if the awakening you're pursuing is just the recognition of what's always been the case? This isn't the ego's favorite message because the ego wants a project. It wants to improve itself. It wants to become enlightened. But awareness doesn't improve. It simply is. You can't become more aware. You can become more aware of awareness, which is different. You can recognize what you've always been, but there's no journey from here to here. This is why Watts said the path is pathless. Any path implies distance between where you are and where you need to be. Any practice implies future attainment. Any technique implies a problem to solve. And yes, practices can be useful. They can calm the mind. They can train attention. They can create conditions where recognition is more likely. But they can't give you what you already are. They can only remove obstacles to recognizing it. So what happens to people who've seen this clearly? Sometimes they stop practicing altogether. If there's nothing to attain, why meditate? Why study? Why do anything? This is spiritual bypassing, using insight to avoid engagement. The recognition that you're already whole doesn't mean you stop bathing or feeding yourself or participating in life. It means you do these things without the burden of trying to become something other than what you are. You engage fully while being free of the seeking that makes engagement feel like suffering. The paradox is that once you stop seeking enlightenment, you might find yourself more consistently in touch with what people call enlightened states, because you're not creating resistance through effort. You're not monitoring whether you're making progress. You're not comparing your experience to some ideal. You're just here being this, doing what seems appropriate, responding to what arises. And that's it. That's the whole thing. But the ego hates this. It wants something more dramatic. It wants a permanent high. It wants to feel special. It wants an experience it can post about. And when it gets that experience, it immediately tries to own it, repeat it, build an identity around it. This is the trap. The experience of unity is real. The thought, I experienced unity, re-implements duality. You can't possess non-duality. The moment you try, you've misunderstood what happened. A woman goes on a meditation retreat. On the 5th day, during sitting practice, the boundary between her body and the room dissolves. She is the room. She is the sound of rain on the roof. She is the breath of the person sitting next to her. There's no separation, no self, just this vast presence aware of itself. It's profound, life-changing, the most real thing she's ever experienced. The bell rings. People stand. She stands. And immediately her mind begins narrating. I just had an awakening experience. This is what I've been working toward. Now I'm different from who I was this morning. She tells people about it. She tries to get back to it in her next sitting. She makes it a story about herself. The experience was genuine. The appropriation of it by ego was instantaneous. How do you avoid this trap? Maybe you don't. Maybe it's part of the process. Ego will do what ego does. The key is recognizing it when it happens and not taking it too seriously. Oh, look, I'm turning insight into identity again. How interesting. Not with judgment, just with lighthearted awareness. The game continues. You just see it as a game. And seeing it as a game changes your relationship to it without needing to stop playing. So now you're living with some degree of clarity. You've seen through various illusions. You've had moments of recognizing your true nature. You're navigating a world that still operates on premises you no longer fully accept. How do you actually do this day to day? How do you pay bills and maintain relationships and contribute to society while living from a completely different paradigm than the one most people assume is reality? First, you get practical. Clarity doesn't pay rent. You still need to eat. You still exist in a social world with rules and expectations. Some of those rules are arbitrary, but violating them has consequences. You can see that money is a social fiction and still need money to survive in this particular social fiction. This isn't compromise. This is pragmatism. Watts drank tea even though he knew all forms are empty. You can see through the game and still play it competently. Second, you find your people. Not everyone will understand where you're coming from. Most won't, that's okay. But you need at least a few people who speak your language. People you can be completely honest with. People who won't pathologize your clarity. These relationships are gold. They remind you that you're not crazy when the mainstream world keeps suggesting you are. They give you space to process what you're seeing without having to translate it into acceptable terms. Third, you develop a practice. Not a spiritual practice aimed at attainment, but a practice of returning to what's true. Maybe it's sitting quietly each morning and remembering who you are beneath all the roles. Maybe it's walking without your phone and feeling directly into the moment. Maybe it's journaling. Maybe it's time in nature. Whatever helps you reconnect with the awareness that's observing all the drama. Whatever reminds you that you're the space in which life happens rather than the character to whom life happens. Fourth, you let go of trying to change anyone. This is huge. The impulse to wake people up is strong, especially when you first see through things. You want everyone to see what you see. You want to save them from their suffering. But you can't. Each person's awakening happens in its own time. Your job isn't to enlighten the world. Your job is to live awake yourself and let that be enough. If your way of being inspires questions in others, great. If not, also great. Their journey isn't your responsibility. Fifth, you find ways to contribute that align with your values. This doesn't mean you need to be a meditation teacher or a philosopher. It means whatever you do, whether you're a plumber or a parent or a programmer, you do it with integrity. You bring presence to it. You serve without attachment to outcome. You work in a way that doesn't compromise what you know to be true. This is its own form of teaching. When people encounter someone who's genuinely at peace, who's not performing or striving or seeking, it creates a question mark in their consciousness. Maybe life doesn't have to be the way I thought it did. Sixth, you take care of your body. The awakening you've experienced doesn't make you immune to physical needs. In fact, being more present means you're more aware of what your body needs. Sleep, movement, nourishing food, time in silence. Physical health supports mental clarity, supports spiritual openness. They're not separate. You're not a soul trapped in a body. You're an embodied consciousness. The body is the instrument through which awareness experiences this dimension of reality. Treat it well. Seventh, you embrace the full catastrophe. You're still going to experience pain, loss, grief, fear. Clarity doesn't mean everything feels good all the time. It means you're not at war with what arises. You feel fully without being overwhelmed. You grieve without falling into despair. You experience fear without being controlled by it. Emotions are weather patterns moving through. You're the sky in which weather happens. The sky isn't damaged by storms. Eighth, you keep checking your own bullshit. Just because you've seen through some illusions doesn't mean you've seen through all of them. Just because you've had insight doesn't mean you're now immune to ego. Stay humble. Stay curious. Stay willing to be wrong. The moment you think you've figured it all out is precisely the moment to get suspicious of your certainty. Nobody gets this completely. We're all works in progress, and the work never ends because reality keeps revealing itself in new ways. Ninth, you find humor in it. God, the whole thing is so absurd. This cosmic game of consciousness pretending to be separate selves who then spend lifetimes trying to remember they're not separate. It's a comedy. When you can laugh at yourself, at the ego's antics, at the cosmic joke we're all living, everything gets lighter. Spiritual seriousness is just ego trying to make itself important. True wisdom has a quality of playfulness. It takes things seriously without taking them ultimately seriously. 10th, you live fully, presently, joyfully when joy arises, sadly when sadness arises, angrily when anger arises. You don't perform a sanitized version of spirituality. You're human, messy, imperfect, alive, and that's the point. You're not here to transcend the human experience. You're here to have it completely, to taste every flavor, to feel every texture. The only difference between you and someone who's still asleep is that you're not resisting the experience or grasping for something different. You're meeting life as it is. So what does transformation actually look like? Not the dramatic enlightenment story where someone has a peak experience and is forever changed. That happens to about 1% of people. For everyone else, transformation is incremental. It's a gradual shift in how you relate to your experience. One day you notice you're not as anxious as you used to be, not because circumstances changed, but because you've stopped arguing with reality. Another day you realize you haven't checked social media in a week because you're no longer seeking external validation. Another day you have a conflict with someone and instead of getting defensive, you stay open and curious about their perspective. Transformation is the accumulation of tiny choices. Choosing presence over distraction, choosing honesty over performance, choosing curiosity over certainty, choosing compassion over judgment. None of these choices feel revolutionary in the moment. You don't suddenly become enlightened because you told the truth in one conversation, but over time, hundreds of these choices reshape your consciousness. Your default mode shifts from contracted to open, from defensive to receptive, from seeking to resting. Let me give you a practical map for this territory, because knowing about clarity is different from embodying it. You can understand everything I've said intellectually and still find yourself trapped in the same patterns. The gap between understanding and living is where most people get stuck. They read the books. They nod along. They agree with the philosophy. And then they go right back to performing the same unconscious script. Not because they're weak or uncommitted, but because changing the operating system requires more than insight. It requires practice. Daily practice. Moment-by-moment practice. Here's what nobody tells you about practice. It's not about getting good at something. It's about becoming aware of what you're already doing. Right now, you're running programs. Automatic responses. Conditioned patterns. Most of them are invisible because they've been running your whole life. The practice is making the invisible visible. Once you see what you're doing, you have choice. Before you see it, you're on autopilot. So let's start with the morning. You wake up. What's the first thing that happens? For most people, the mind immediately starts. It grabs onto the first worry it can find. Did I send that email? What time is that meeting? I can't believe they said that yesterday. Within seconds, you're no longer present. You're in psychological time, rehearsing the future or rehashing the past. The day hasn't started and you're already gone. Here's a different possibility. You wake up. Before you reach for your phone, before you start thinking, you notice that you're aware. There's wakefulness here. There's presence before thought. Can you rest in that for even 30 seconds? Just feeling the aliveness in your body, the breath moving, the simple fact of being here without any story about what it means. This isn't meditation. This isn't a special practice. This is just noticing what's already happening before the mind starts narrating. Try it tomorrow. Set an intention tonight. The moment you wake, before anything else, notice awareness. Not thinking about awareness. Just being it. If thoughts come, fine. Let them come. But see if you can feel the space they're appearing in. See if you can recognize yourself as that space rather than the content moving through it. 30 seconds. That's all. 30 seconds of being present to presence itself before the day's performance begins. Now you get out of bed. You move to the bathroom. You brush your teeth. Here's where it gets interesting. Are you actually brushing your teeth or are you thinking about something else while your body goes through the motions? Most people spend their entire lives doing one thing while thinking about another. The body is in the present, the mind is elsewhere, and the result is a constant low-grade dissociation that feels normal only because it's constant. What if you actually brushed your teeth? Felt the bristles? Tasted the toothpaste? Noticed the sound? It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Who cares about brushing teeth? But that's the point. If you can't be present for something as simple as this, how will you be present for something complex? Presence isn't reserved for special moments. It's available in every moment, but you have to choose it. So here's your first micro-challenge. For the next 7 days, pick one routine activity. Washing your face, making coffee, putting on your shoes, something you do every day without thinking. And for those few minutes, be completely there. No phone, no mental planning, just full attention on what's actually happening. Notice how difficult this is. Notice how your mind resists. Notice how it keeps trying to grab something more interesting to think about. Don't judge it. Just notice. This noticing is the practice. After a week, something shifts. Not because you're now a master of washing your face, but because you've interrupted the automatic mode. You've created a wedge of awareness in what was previously unconscious routine. And that wedge changes everything. Because if you can be present washing your face, you can be present in conversation. If you can be present making coffee, you can be present with emotion. The skill is the same. The context changes, but the skill is identical. Let's move through the day. You're at work or managing your household or doing whatever fills your hours. Things happen that trigger you. Someone says something that feels like criticism. You get an email that creates anxiety. A situation doesn't go the way you wanted. And immediately, automatically you react. Your body tenses. Your thoughts spin. Your emotions intensify. Before you know what's happening, you're in the grip of a pattern that's decades old. This is where most spiritual teaching fails people. It tells you to be present, to stay aware, to respond instead of react. But it doesn't tell you what to do when you're already reacting, when you're already lost in the pattern, when awareness seems impossible because you're completely identified with the reaction. Here's what you do. You notice that you're reacting. That's it. You don't stop the reaction. You don't suppress it. You don't try to be spiritual about it. You just notice, oh, I'm reacting right now. That noticing creates space. Not always. Not immediately. Sometimes you notice halfway through. Sometimes you notice afterward. But even noticing afterward is valuable because it trains the muscle of awareness. Next time you'll notice sooner. Eventually you'll notice as it's happening. And eventually you'll notice the moment before it happens, the trigger before the reaction. And in that moment, you'll have choice. Here's a practice script for working with triggers. When something activates you, stop if you can. If you're in the middle of a conversation and can't stop, come back to this later. Place your hand on your chest. Feel your heart beating. Notice the sensations in your body. Where is the activation? Chest, throat, stomach, shoulders? Just feel it without trying to change it. Now ask yourself, how old does this feeling feel? This is a strange question, but try it. Does this feeling have a young quality to it? Often, what we're feeling in the present has a root in the past. A current trigger is activating an old wound. When you recognize this, something softens. You realize you're not actually in danger. You're just feeling an old feeling that got activated by a new situation. Now take 3 conscious breaths. Slow inhale through the nose. Long exhale through the mouth. Feel your feet on the ground. Look around and name 5 things you can see. This brings you back to present moment sensory reality. The trigger loses some of its charge. You haven't solved anything. You haven't made the situation different. But you've interrupted the automatic cascade from trigger to reaction to regret. You've created a moment of consciousness in what was previously unconscious. Do this enough times and the pattern starts to loosen. Let's talk about relapse, because you will relapse. You'll have weeks of clarity followed by days of complete identification with the drama. You'll practice presence and then forget everything you know in the heat of conflict. You'll see through the game and then get totally absorbed in playing it. This doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're human. The path isn't linear. It's more like a spiral. You keep coming back to the same issues at deeper levels of understanding. The key is catching yourself faster each time. The first time you fall back into old patterns, it might take days to notice. The 10th time, maybe hours. The 100th time, maybe minutes. Eventually, you can be in the middle of reactivity and simultaneously aware that you're in it. You're both the actor and the audience. You're playing the role and watching yourself play it. This dual awareness doesn't stop the role from being played, but it changes your relationship to it. You're no longer owned by it. Here's your relapse-proofing plan. First, expect relapse. Don't make it mean something about your spiritual progress. Don't use it as evidence that you're not getting it. Relapse is part of the process. It's how you discover what triggers remain, what conditioning is still active, what needs more awareness. Second, when you notice you've relapsed, pause and get curious instead of critical. What happened? What was the trigger? What story got activated? What are you believing about yourself or others or reality in this moment? Investigation is more useful than judgment. Third, return to your body. Relapse lives in your head. It's all story, all thought, all identification with mental content. Your body is always in the present, so drop out of your head and into sensation. Feel your breath. Feel your feet. Feel the temperature of the air. This isn't spiritual bypassing. This is using the body as an anchor back to what's actually happening instead of the story about what's happening. Fourth, reach out. Call one of your people, the ones who understand. Tell them you're lost. You don't need them to fix you. You just need to say it out loud to someone who won't pathologize it. Speaking it breaks the spell. You hear yourself and realize how absurd the story sounds when it's not just inside your head. Fifth, do something simple and physical. Wash dishes. Take a walk. Stretch. Move. The mind will want to keep thinking its way out of the problem. Let the body lead instead. There's wisdom in movement. There's a shift that happens when you stop analyzing and start doing something concrete. Sixth, remember one true thing. What's one thing you know for sure even when everything else feels uncertain? Maybe it's that you're aware. Maybe it's that this too shall pass. Maybe it's that you've been here before and found your way back. Hold on to that one true thing. Let it be enough. Now let's build a practice structure for the next 30 days. Not because 30 days will fix everything, but because 30 days is enough time to establish new neural pathways, to create new default responses, to shift the center of gravity in your consciousness. Think of this as an experiment. You're testing what happens when you bring consistent awareness to your daily life. You're gathering data. You're not trying to achieve some perfect state. You're just curious about what changes when you pay attention. Day 1. Morning presence. Wake up and notice awareness before thinking starts. 30 seconds. Evening reflection. Before sleep, recall 3 moments today when you were actually present. Write them down if you want. Just recalling them reinforces the neural pathway that notices presence. Day 2. Morning presence plus the routine activity practice. Pick your one thing. Brushing teeth, making coffee, whatever. Be completely there. Evening reflection. Plus one thing you're grateful for that has nothing to do with achievement or acquisition. Grateful for the sound of rain, for the taste of water, for the warmth of your bed. Something immediate and sensory. Day 3. Continue morning presence and routine activity. Add this. 3 times today, stop whatever you're doing and take 1 conscious breath. Set alarms on your phone if you need to. 1 breath where you're aware that you're breathing. That's all. Evening reflection, gratitude, and now add 1 moment today when you noticed yourself reacting instead of responding. No judgment, just observation. Day 4. Same practices. Add phone detox. Pick 1 hour today where your phone is in another room. If that's impossible, pick 30 minutes. No checking, no scrolling. Be with what arises when the distraction option is removed. Notice the impulse to reach for it. Notice the anxiety that might come. Don't suppress anything. Just feel it. Evening reflection. What did you discover during phone-free time? Day 5. All previous practices. Add difficult conversation prep. If you have a hard conversation coming up, spend 5 minutes beforehand getting present. Feel your feet. Take 3 breaths. Set an intention. Not to win or to be right, but to stay conscious, to listen fully, to speak truth without attack. If you don't have a difficult conversation, practice this anyway, as if you do. It trains the nervous system. Evening reflection. How did intention change the quality of your interactions today? Day 6. Continue all practices. Add body scan. 5 minutes before bed, lie down. Starting at your feet, bring attention to each part of your body. Just noticing, no fixing. Where is there tension? Where is there ease? Don't change anything. This isn't relaxation practice. This is awareness practice. You're learning to inhabit your body instead of just thinking about your body. Day 7. All practices maintained. Add review. Look back at the week. What's shifted? What's harder than expected? What's easier? What are you noticing about your patterns? Write for 10 minutes without editing. Stream of consciousness. Let the awareness that's been building have a voice. Don't make this mean anything. Just note what you see. Week 2 is about deepening. You've established some basic practices. Now we complicate them slightly. Same morning presence. Same routine activity. But now add, catch yourself in 1 story today. Just 1. Notice when you're telling yourself a story about why something happened, or what someone meant, or what will happen next. Notice the story isn't reality. It's interpretation. You don't have to stop the story. Just see it as story. This is huge. Most suffering comes from believing our stories are facts. Also in week 2, practice saying no. At least once in these 7 days, decline something you'd normally agree to out of obligation or people-pleasing or guilt. Notice the discomfort. Notice the guilt. Notice the fear. Don't let those feelings stop you. Say no anyway. See what happens. Often nothing happens. The catastrophe you imagine doesn't occur. People don't hate you. The world doesn't end. You just have more space in your life because you stopped agreeing to things you don't actually want to do. Add this. 1 uncomfortable truth spoken. Something small, something true that you'd normally suppress to keep the peace. Not designed to hurt anyone, just honest. Maybe you tell your partner you need alone time. Maybe you tell your friend their repeated complaints are draining you. Maybe you admit to your boss that you don't have capacity for another project. Watch what happens when you tell the truth. Often the relationship deepens. Sometimes it reveals that the relationship was based on performance rather than authenticity. Either way, you learn something valuable. Week 3 is where it gets interesting. You've built some momentum. Now you test it against real conditions. All previous practices continue, but now you deliberately put yourself in challenging situations. Have the conversation you've been avoiding. Go to the event where you usually feel like an outsider. Spend time with the family member who triggers you. Not masochistically, consciously. You're bringing your practice into the fire to see what remains when the heat is on. Before each challenging situation, do this preparation. Sit quietly for 5 minutes. Feel the resistance in your body, the part of you that doesn't want to do this. Instead of overriding it, talk to it. Acknowledge it. Thank it for trying to protect you. Let it know you've got this. You're not abandoning the scared part. You're just not letting it run the show. Then set your intention. I will stay present. I will breathe consciously. I will notice when I want to defend and choose curiosity instead. I will be honest without being cruel. I will take breaks if I need to. During the situation, come back to breath whenever you notice you're getting activated. This becomes your anchor. Breath is always available, always now. 3 conscious breaths can shift your entire state. Don't wait until you're drowning. Breathe before the wave hits. After the situation, debrief with yourself. What happened? Where did I stay present? Where did I lose it? What did I learn? No judgment, just honest reflection. You're building a relationship with yourself based on truth rather than self-criticism or self-inflation. Week 4 is integration. You've learned practices. You've tested them. Now you make them invisible. The practice becomes the way you live rather than something you do. Morning presence isn't a special thing anymore. It's just what happens when you wake up. Routine activity attention isn't effort. It's the new normal. Conscious breathing isn't a technique. It's your default response to intensity. You're not trying to maintain these things. They're maintaining themselves because you've repeated them enough that they've become the path of least resistance. This is the goal. Not to be perfect, but to have practice so integrated that it catches you when you fall without you having to think about it. Your hand goes to your chest automatically when you're triggered. Your breath slows automatically when you notice tension. Your mind questions its stories automatically instead of believing them uncritically. These automatic awarenesses protect you from the automatic unconsciousness that used to run your life. But here's what else happens in week 4. You notice the subtle ways you're still seeking, still trying to get somewhere, still hoping that if you practice enough, you'll finally arrive at a permanent state of peace. And you realize that this seeking is itself the problem. The practices aren't about getting somewhere. They're about being here, fully, completely, without reservation. You stop doing practices to become enlightened and start doing them because they're expressions of the enlightenment that's already the case. This shift is everything. When you practice to get somewhere, there's tension, there's effort, there's the gap between where you are and where you should be. When you practice as an expression of what you already are, there's ease, there's playfulness, there's the recognition that you're not fixing yourself. You're just removing the obstructions to seeing what was always true. You're like someone cleaning windows. You're not creating the light. You're just letting it through. Let me tell you about someone who did this work. A man in his 40s, successful by conventional measures, miserable by any honest assessment. He found these ideas and started practicing. First week was hard. He couldn't stay present for 30 seconds without his mind wandering to work problems. The routine activity practice felt pointless. He almost quit. But something in him knew this was important, so he continued. Second week, something shifted. He was in a meeting, stressed as always, and suddenly he noticed he was holding his breath. That simple noticing allowed him to breathe. The situation didn't change, but his experience of it did. He wasn't quite so identified with the stress. There was breathing happening, awareness of breathing, and somehow that created space for the stress to be there without consuming him. Third week, his wife said something critical. Normally he'd defend, argue, make her wrong. This time he felt the defensiveness arise, and instead of acting on it, he got curious. Why is this threatening? What am I protecting? He realized he was protecting an image of himself as competent and together. Her criticism threatened that image. But the image wasn't real. It was a story he'd been maintaining for decades. He looked at his wife and said, "You're right. I have been disconnected. I'm sorry." She started crying. They had the first honest conversation they'd had in years. By week 4, his co-workers were asking what was different. He seemed calmer, more focused, less reactive. He wasn't doing anything dramatic. He was just present more of the time. He listened instead of planning his response. He admitted when he didn't know instead of bluffing. He stopped taking himself so seriously. The interesting thing is his work improved. Not because he was trying harder, but because he was wasting less energy on maintaining pretenses. He had more capacity for what actually mattered. 6 months later, he quit his job. Not out of reactivity or escape, but because he'd gotten clear on what he actually wanted. The job wasn't wrong. It just wasn't his anymore. He took a year off, traveled, read, spent time with his kids. Didn't post about it. Didn't make it a story about finding himself. just lived without the constant narration. When he went back to work, it was in a completely different field. Less money, more meaning. No regrets. That's one version of what this looks like. Yours will be different. The specifics don't matter. What matters is that you commit to seeing clearly and living from that sight. What matters is that you stop defending illusions even when the truth is inconvenient. What matters is that you value presence over performance, authenticity over approval, being over achieving. Now let's address some of the obstacles you'll face. The first and biggest is that everyone around you has an investment in who you've been. They're comfortable with the old version of you. When you start changing, it threatens the equilibrium. Your partner might not like that you're setting boundaries. Your parents might criticize your new choices. Your friends might drift away because you're no longer playing the old games. This is painful, but it's also necessary. You can't become authentic while maintaining all the relationships built on your inauthenticity. Some relationships will adapt. The people who love the real you will adjust to the real you showing up. They might be confused at first. They might resist. But if there's genuine connection underneath the roles, the relationship will deepen as you become more real. Other relationships will end. Not dramatically. They'll just fade. You'll have less in common. You'll have less to talk about. You'll notice the relationship was always transactional or based on mutual performance. Letting these go makes space for relationships based on truth. The second obstacle is your own doubt. You'll have moments of thinking you're wrong. Everyone else seems fine with the way things are. Maybe you're the problem. Maybe you're overthinking it. Maybe you should just get back in line and stop making everything so difficult. These thoughts are the ego's last defense. It knows it's losing ground, so it tries to convince you that clarity is the problem rather than the solution. When these thoughts come, notice them. Thank them for trying to protect you, and continue anyway. The third obstacle is subtle spiritual materialism. You'll catch yourself using your practice to feel superior. Look at all these unconscious people. I'm awake and they're asleep. I've seen through it and they're still believing the illusion. This is ego co-opting insight for its own purposes. The moment you think you're more evolved than someone else, you've lost the plot. Evolution isn't a hierarchy. It's a process. Everyone is exactly where they are. Your job isn't to be better than others. It's to be true to yourself. The fourth obstacle is thinking you can do this alone. You can't, not really. You need mirrors. You need people who will reflect back what they see, who will call you on your bullshit, who will celebrate your breakthroughs without making you special. You need community, even if it's just 2 or 3 people who really get it. Isolation might feel safe, but it's actually dangerous. It's too easy to get lost in your own head, to mistake your thoughts for reality, to build elaborate justifications for your patterns. Other people pop those bubbles. They bring perspective. They remind you that you're not alone in this. The fifth obstacle is not forgiving yourself when you mess up. You will mess up, constantly. You'll lose presence. You'll react unconsciously. You'll betray your own values. You'll forget everything you know and act like you've learned nothing. Don't make this a problem. Every time you notice you've messed up, you have an opportunity. You can criticize yourself and reinforce the pattern of self-judgment. Or you can be curious about what happened and learn from it. One path keeps you stuck. The other liberates you. Choose curiosity over criticism every single time. Here's another practice that's particularly powerful. Every evening, review your day. Not to judge it, but to see it clearly. Where were you conscious today? Where were you unconscious? Where did you act from presence? Where did you act from pattern? Don't make any of it mean you're good or bad. Just notice. Over time, this noticing creates a feedback loop. You become more aware during the day because you know you'll be reviewing it later. You catch yourself sooner because you're training the awareness muscle through consistent use. As you review, ask yourself these questions. When did I feel most alive today? Not happy necessarily, but alive, engaged, present, fully here. That's a clue to what resonates with your actual values versus your conditioned values. When did I feel most dead? Most like I was going through motions? That's showing you where you're still living from obligation or habit rather than choice. What did I avoid today? What conversation, what feeling, what truth? Avoidance is information. It shows you where fear is still running the show. What brought me joy? Simple, immediate joy. Not pleasure from achievement or acquisition, but the uncomplicated happiness of being alive. These moments are breadcrumbs leading you toward what actually matters. Let's talk about working with difficult emotions. Because seeing clearly doesn't mean you stop feeling. You don't become some detached Buddha floating above human experience. You feel everything. More intensely, actually. Because you're not numbing or distracting or denying. You're letting emotions move through you completely. This is different from being overwhelmed by emotions. When you're overwhelmed, you are the emotion. When you're allowing emotions, you're the space in which emotion arises. Here's how you practice with emotions. Let's say anger comes. Most people either express it unconsciously, lashing out, or repress it, pushing it down. Both options are resistance. Both create problems. Expression becomes regrettable action. Repression becomes tension and illness. The third way is to feel it completely without acting on it. Let the anger be in your body. Let it move as energy. Notice where it is. Chest, throat, arms, jaw. Stay with the sensation underneath the story. Not the thoughts about why you're angry. The actual felt sense of anger as energy in the body. Breathe with it. Long, slow breaths. You're not trying to make the anger go away. You're creating space for it to be here. You're saying yes to what is, and something amazing happens. When you stop resisting the emotion, it completes. It moves through. It transforms. 5 minutes of feeling anger completely will discharge it more effectively than 5 hours of thinking about it or 5 days of suppressing it. The same works for grief, for fear, for shame. Whatever arises, turn toward it. Feel it. Let it move. It will pass if you don't grasp it or push it away. This is radically different from what most of us learned. We learned emotions are problems to solve. We learned we should only feel good emotions and fix bad ones. But emotions aren't good or bad. They're just data. They're energy. They're information about how we're relating to what's happening. When you stop judging emotions and start experiencing them, they lose their power over you. You can be angry without being controlled by anger. You can be sad without falling into despair. You can be afraid without being paralyzed. Try this when difficult emotion arises. Place both hands on your heart. Feel the warmth. Say quietly to yourself, this is hard right now. Acknowledge the difficulty without making it a catastrophe. Then say, I can feel this. Not I should feel this or I want to feel this, but I can. You have the capacity to hold whatever arises. You're not fragile. You're not going to break. You're vast enough to contain every emotion that moves through you. Feel that vastness. Rest in it. Let the emotion be as big as it needs to be. It won't destroy you. Nothing can destroy what you actually are. After the intensity passes, thank the emotion. This sounds strange, but try it. Thank you for showing me I care. Thank you for revealing what matters. Thank you for the energy to respond. Emotions are messengers. When you receive the message, they can leave. When you ignore or resist them, they keep knocking louder. Gratitude completes the circuit. It lets the emotion know it's been heard and can move along. Here's something else nobody tells you. Joy requires the same practice as difficult emotions. Most people can't actually feel joy. They can feel excitement, which is joy mixed with anticipation of future good things. They can feel pleasure, which is sensory satisfaction. But pure joy, the kind that has no cause, that's just an expression of being alive. Most people have no access to that. Why? Because they've spent so long controlling their experience that they can't let anything in fully. Joy is as vulnerable as grief. It requires the same openness, the same willingness to be touched by life. Practice with joy the same way you practice with pain. When something delights you, stop. Feel it completely. Let yourself be ridiculous with it. Laugh out loud. Dance if you want to. Don't moderate it. Don't make it appropriate. Children know how to do this. They feel joy and they express it fully. Somewhere along the way, we learned that full expression is embarrassing or childish or too much. We learned to contain ourselves. But containing joy is containing life. When you free joy, you free everything. Each day, find one moment of simple joy and let yourself feel it without reservation. The taste of your first coffee. The way light comes through your window. Your dog's excitement when you come home. A perfect sentence in a book. Rain on your face. Don't skip past these moments. Don't take them for granted. Stop and let them fill you. This is the practice of being alive. This is what you came here for. Not to achieve or acquire or prove anything. Just to experience the astounding fact of existence in all its flavors. Let's talk about money again. More practically this time. Because seeing through the illusion of money doesn't mean you don't need it. You need shelter. You need food. You need health care. The question is, how much do you actually need versus how much you've been convinced you need? Most people spend their lives earning money for things they don't want to impress people they don't like. They're trapped in debt, in obligations, in golden handcuffs. They can't leave the soul-crushing job because they've built a lifestyle that requires that income. Here's the radical move. Reduce your needs, aggressively. Figure out the minimum you can live on and then add a small buffer. That's your number. Everything you earn above that is freedom. It's the ability to say no. It's options. It's time. Most people have this backward. They increase their lifestyle as income increases. The hedonic treadmill. You make more, you spend more, you're never ahead. Instead, keep your lifestyle stable as income grows. Let the gap between earnings and spending become your liberation fund. This doesn't mean living in deprivation. It means being conscious about what actually adds value to your life versus what you've been conditioned to want. A bigger house? Does it actually make you happier, or does it just cost more to maintain? A new car? Does it improve your life or just your image? Designer clothes? Are you dressing for yourself or for others' approval? When you strip away consumption driven by insecurity or status seeking, you find you need far less than you thought. Here's a 30-day practice. Track every dollar you spend, not to judge it, to see it. At the end of 30 days, categorize your spending. How much went to actual needs? How much went to genuine values? How much went to unconscious habit? How much went to status or image? How much went to numbing or distraction? This isn't about restricting yourself. It's about bringing consciousness to how you exchange your life energy for money and then exchange that money for things. Are the exchanges honest? Are they serving you? Or are you serving patterns you inherited from a culture that profits from your unconsciousness? Once you see clearly, make adjustments. Cancel subscriptions you don't use. Stop buying clothes you don't need. Cook instead of ordering out. Walk instead of driving when possible. Each of these choices is small. Together they add up to significant freedom. They reduce the amount of money you need, which reduces the amount of time you need to sell to earn that money, which gives you time to live. Time is the only real wealth. Everything else is just a means to get time. Some of you will resist this. You'll say you've worked hard for your lifestyle. You deserve nice things, and maybe you do. But ask yourself honestly, are the nice things making you happy? Are they worth the cost in time, in stress, in the compromises you make to afford them? Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the nice thing genuinely brings joy, but often you find the joy you expected doesn't materialize. The happiness you thought would come with the purchase lasts a few days, and then you're back to baseline, looking for the next thing that will finally satisfy. The Buddhist insight is that satisfaction never comes from external conditions. It comes from within. When you're at peace with what is, you can enjoy possessions without needing them. You can have nice things without them having you. But if you're looking to possessions to fill an inner emptiness, no amount will ever be enough. You're trying to fix an internal problem with external solutions. It doesn't work. It never has. It never will. Here's what does work. Cultivate contentment. This is different from complacency. Complacency is giving up. Contentment is showing up fully for what is. It's appreciating what you have instead of fixating on what you lack. It's finding richness in the ordinary. It's not needing more to feel complete. This is a practice. Every day, find something you have that you usually take for granted and really see it. Your functioning body, your warm bed, access to clean water, people who love you, the fact that you can read, the ability to think. None of this is guaranteed. All of it is miracle. When you see it that way, contentment arises naturally. Now let's address purpose one more time, because this question won't leave you alone. What should I do with my life? What's my calling? What's my contribution? These questions come from the assumption that your life needs to justify itself. That you're here for a reason, and if you don't figure out the reason, you've failed. But what if there's no reason? What if you're here because existence delights in expressing itself through infinite forms, and you're one of those forms, and that's enough? This doesn't mean don't do things. It means the things you do don't need to carry the weight of ultimate meaning. You can work and create and serve and love without needing it to be your purpose with a capital P. You can engage fully with your life while holding it lightly. You can care deeply without making yourself important. The paradox is that when you stop seeking purpose and just live true to what you see, purpose emerges organically. Not as something you discover, but as something you become through being authentic. Your purpose is to be yourself, completely, without apology or explanation. To bring your unique angle of consciousness to whatever you encounter. To respond from your truth rather than from your conditioning. To say yes when you mean yes and no when you mean no. To create if you're called to create. To serve if you're called to serve. To rest if you're called to rest. There's no one right way to live. There's only your way, and discovering it is the work. Here's a practice for clarifying your way. Imagine you have 6 months to live. You're not in pain. You're fully functional. You just know the time is limited. What changes? What do you stop doing immediately? What do you start doing? Who do you spend time with? Who do you stop spending time with? What do you say that you've been holding back? What do you let go of that you've been clinging to? The answers to these questions are showing you the gap between how you're living and how you'd live if you were free from fear of death. But you don't need to wait for terminal diagnosis to live that way. You can start now. Most people won't do this. They'll keep postponing the real life for when conditions are better, when they have more money, when they have more time, when the kids are grown, when they retire. They'll spend their whole lives waiting for permission to start living. Don't be most people. The conditions will never be perfect. Start now with what you have where you are. Live like you mean it. Take the risks that matter. Have the conversations that need having. Create what wants to be created through you. Love who you love without holding back. This is not rehearsal. This is the show. I want to tell you about another person, a woman in her 50s, empty nest, marriage functional but flat, career successful but meaningless. She'd spent 30 years being what everyone needed her to be. Good mother, good wife, good employee, good daughter. She was so good at being good that she'd lost touch with who she actually was underneath all the roles. Then her best friend died, suddenly, brain aneurysm. One day there, next day gone. It broke something open in her. She realized she'd been living like she had forever. She'd been postponing her own life to maintain everyone else's comfort. She'd been so careful, so responsible, so appropriate. And for what? Her friend never got to take the trip she'd planned. Never left the job she hated. Never told her husband she was unhappy. Just died in the middle of a regular Wednesday with all her unlived life still inside her. The woman didn't go crazy. She didn't blow up her life dramatically. She just started telling the truth. Small truths first. No, I don't want to host Thanksgiving this year. No, I don't want to join that committee. Yes, I want to take a pottery class even though I'm terrible at it. Her family was confused. What's wrong with you? Nothing's wrong. Something's right. I'm waking up. She started therapy. Not because she was broken, but because she wanted support while she figured out who she was beyond her roles. She started saying no to social obligations that drained her. She started asking for what she needed in her marriage. Her husband was resistant at first. They'd had an unspoken agreement for decades, and she was changing the terms. But she held steady. I love you and I need things to change. We can change together, or I'll change alone. But I'm not going back to sleep. They did couples work. It was hard. He had to face how much he'd relied on her to manage his emotional life. She had to face how much she'd enabled his dependence because it made her feel needed. They had to build a new relationship based on two adults instead of parent-child dynamics. Not everyone makes it through this. They did. Barely. But what emerged was real partnership for the first time in their 30-year marriage. She also shifted her work. She couldn't quit, needed the income, but she stopped trying to climb the ladder. She started working to live instead of living to work. She took her full vacation time. She stopped checking email on weekends. She let go of the fantasy that her dedication would be rewarded with meaning. Work was work. It paid bills. That's all it needed to be. She found her meaning outside of work, in her pottery, in volunteering, in deep conversations with friends, in time alone, in learning to be with herself without constant doing. 3 years later, she's different. Not fixed, different, more herself, less apologetic, more boundaried, less accommodating. She's not always happy. She has hard days. But she's not numb anymore. She's not sleepwalking. She's alive in a way she wasn't before her friend died. The gift her friend gave her was the wake-up call. The reminder that time is finite and unlived life is the only tragedy. She gets it now. She's living it now. Not perfectly. But really, this is what's on the other side of the choice. Not perfection. Not permanent peace. Not the end of problems. Just realness, authenticity, the experience of being yourself in your life instead of performing yourself for others. And that's worth every bit of discomfort the transition requires. Every awkward conversation, every disappointed person, every moment of doubt, it's all worth it to finally stop pretending and start being. So where are you in this process? Are you still protecting the illusion? Are you starting to question? Are you in the messy middle of transition? Are you on the other side, living awake more than asleep? Wherever you are is fine. This isn't a race. It's a journey. And the journey looks different for everyone. Your pace is your pace. Your path is your path. The only question that matters is, are you moving toward truth or away from it? Are you becoming more honest or more defended? Are you opening or closing? If you're opening, you're on track. Even if it's painful, even if it's slow, even if you can't see where it's going, opening is the direction. The rest will take care of itself. If you're closing, If you're retreating into old patterns because the new way is too uncertain, that's information. No judgment. Just notice. What's the fear? What are you protecting? What would need to shift for you to feel safe enough to keep opening? Sometimes you need to close for a while, to integrate, to rest, to build resources. This isn't failure. It's part of the rhythm. But be honest about whether you're closing temporarily to gather strength or whether you're giving up and going back to sleep. There's a difference. One is strategic. One is surrender. Know which one you're doing and why. Let me give you one more practice. This is for the moments when everything feels too hard. When you're tired of being conscious. When you just want to go back to the comfortable lies. When you're questioning whether any of this matters. In those moments, find something beautiful. Anything. A flower. A piece of music. The sky. A child laughing. Let it fill your attention completely. Just for a minute. Let beauty remind you what you're here for. Not to figure everything out. Not to be perfect. Just to witness and participate in this astonishing display of existence expressing itself. That's enough. That's always been enough. The transformation I'm pointing to isn't about becoming someone different. It's about stripping away what you're not until what remains is what you've always been. Awareness, presence, consciousness. The one who's been watching this whole time. The one who's never been damaged by anything that's happened, because it exists prior to all happening. That one. You, the real you. Not the story. Not the ego. Not the roles. The awareness in which all of that appears. And here's the final piece. Once you recognize yourself as that awareness, you realize you were never lost. How can awareness be lost? It's always here. Always present. Always aware. You can't lose what you are. You can only forget. And now you're remembering, not as an idea, as lived experience, as the ground from which you operate, as the truth that can't be shaken no matter what happens in the world of form. They call you crazy. Let them. You know what you know. You see what you see, and nothing they say can unsee it for you. The game is obvious now. You can't go back to believing it's real. But you also don't have to reject it. You can play it consciously, with one foot in and one foot out, fully engaged and completely detached, caring deeply about everything while attached to nothing. This is mastery, not transcending the human experience, including it, embracing it, living it so completely that the living becomes enlightenment. Not in some future moment. Right now, in this breath, this heartbeat, this inexplicable fact of being here at all. Welcome home. And here's what nobody tells you. It's not linear. You'll have periods of clarity followed by periods of confusion. You'll remember who you are and then forget again. You'll act from presence one moment and from ego the next. This is normal. This is the human experience. The practice is noticing when you've drifted and returning to what's true. Return and return and return over and over without judgment, without making it mean you failed. The returning is the practice. What you'll discover if you keep at it is that the space between drifting and recognizing you've drifted gets shorter. You catch yourself faster. You spend less time lost in stories. You can be in the middle of reaction and suddenly see it for what it is and choose something different. This is freedom. Not freedom from reaction, but freedom within it. You still have emotions. You still have preferences. You still participate in life. But there's awareness holding it all, and that awareness is never disturbed by what it holds. People will still call you crazy. Let them. Their opinion doesn't define your reality. You know what you've seen. You know the freedom you've touched. You know the difference between clarity and delusion, even if you can't always maintain clarity. Trust that knowing. Live from it as consistently as you can. And when you forget, because you will forget, don't make it a problem. Just notice. Smile at yourself. And come back. The closing promise isn't that everything gets easy. It's that you get real. You stop pretending. You stop performing. You stop seeking something outside this moment to make this moment acceptable. You discover what you actually are underneath all the conditioning, beneath all the stories, prior to all concepts. And what you discover is that you're okay. You always have been. The seeking was the problem. The recognition that you're already what you were looking for is the solution. You're not broken. You never were. You were just caught in a cultural trance that told you you needed fixing. You were just identified with patterns of thought that created the illusion of insufficiency. You were just believing the story instead of recognizing the storyteller. Now you've seen through it. Not perfectly, not permanently, but enough to know there's something more real than the consensus reality everyone's defending, so they call you crazy. So what? You call them asleep. Neither is quite right. You're all consciousness playing different games. Some people are playing the conventional game. You're playing a different one. Neither is superior. Both are valid expressions of the infinite pretending to be finite for the sheer joy of eventually remembering it's infinite. You just happen to be in the remembering phase. That's all. Don't make yourself special for it. Don't make them wrong for not being there yet. Just live from what you know and let that be your contribution. The world doesn't need you to save it. It needs you to be authentic, to live with integrity, to stop adding to the collective delusion and start embodying the truth you've touched. That's enough. More than enough. Because one person living awake creates ripples. You have no idea who's watching, who's noticing, who's getting permission from your example to question their own assumptions. You're not responsible for their awakening. You're only responsible for staying true to yours. And on the days when you forget, when you're back in the drama, when you're caught in the story and you can't find your way to presence, those days are okay too. This isn't about perfection. It's about direction. Are you generally moving toward truth or away from it? Are you becoming more honest or more defended? Are you opening or closing? The trajectory matters more than any single moment. You've been given a gift, the gift of clear sight in a world that's chosen blindness. What you do with that gift is your choice. You can hide it to fit in. You can weaponize it to feel superior. Or you can simply live it quietly without fanfare, letting your life be the evidence of what's possible when you stop defending illusions. The last option is the hardest and the most rewarding. It asks everything of you and gives you everything in return. So welcome to the other side of crazy. Population, smaller than you'd hope, larger than you'd think. We're the ones who stop pretending we don't see what we see. We're the ones who value truth over comfort. We're the ones who'd rather be authentic than approved of. We're the ones who've tasted something real and can't go back to the artificial. No matter how much social pressure we face, we're not special. We're not superior. We're just awake in a sleeping world, doing our best to live with what we know, making it up as we go, falling and returning, forgetting and remembering, being human in a way that's honest. And maybe, just maybe, by living this way, we make it slightly easier for the next person to trust their own clear sight, to question what they're told to believe, to choose authenticity over performance, to stop defending the theater and start living the truth. That's not saving the world. That's just being yourself. But yourself, fully expressed, without apology or explanation, is a radical act in a culture that demands conformity. Your sanity looks like madness. Fine. Be mad. Be gloriously, truthfully, freely mad. The sane world needs the reminder that reality is bigger than their story of it. You are that reminder. Live accordingly.